Chairman, there are concerns about the electoral law, the constitution, and the 2023 election. Former NBA president and senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Olisa Agbakoba, has written to the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, seeking clarifications for the requirements for winning the presidential election. Mr. Agbakoba, in his letter to INEC Chairman Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, is seeking to clarify the Commission's position on Section 134 of the 1999 Constitution to the public. The former chairman of the president of the Nigerian Bar Association, in a letter dated January 17, 2002, an address to the INEC chairman, said that his request for clarification on the provision of this section was premised on the seemingly ambiguous nature of the section, even as it concerns the electoral process. Well, let's break it down and let's hear from the horse's mouth. Mr. Olisa Agbakoba joins us live virtually from Lagos. Thank you so much, Leonard Sik, for joining us tonight, and it's good to see you. I guess Happy New Year will be in order, although it's 18 days into the new year, but yeah. I've not seen you this year. Let's begin. I thought that it's pretty clear. And jokingly, I was having a conversation, and the scenario which played out after the 1979 election, where there was going to be a political mathematics to determine who the president was then, became a very major one for not only our jurisprudence, our electoral process, but also for Nigeria's politics. But Mr. Agbakoba, I thought this was pretty clear on how a president should emerge. But for you, a senior lawyer, to be writing to INEC for clarification, then something must be wrong. Well, Happy New Year to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, something may or may not be wrong, but just as you said, in 1979, we all thought that it was clear what 2/3 meant. Now, it wasn't clear in the end. So I got a call, interestingly, from a close friend, client, and the question was, actually, I had no idea about this issue. And the question was posed as to what exactly does Section 134 mean? And I looked at it, and I thought it had a couple of interpretations. On the one hand, it seems quite simple to say Section 134 requires a presidential candidate to win a quarter of the votes in 2/3 of all the states, which will be 24 out of 36. The problem is, what do we do with the Federal Capital Territory of Abuja? So in law, we have an interpretation process, which means you can interpret Section 134 conjunctively, which means you include the Federal Capital Territory in the 24 states. So if you won 24 states without winning Federal Capital Territory, you are through. The other interpretation is disjunctive, which means that in addition to winning 24 states, you need to win Abuja. Which means actually, if you count Abuja as a state, quote unquote, you needed to do 25. So which is correct, 24 or 25? That's the issue. And I can tell you on good authority, now I've researched and discovered that a couple of presidential candidates who became president did not actually win Abuja. So the question is, what do you do with their presidency? Is it valid or invalid? So I just thought to myself, why don't I just ask the INEC chair, because I think he's doing a fantastic job. I watched him at Chatham House. He's done everything. But this little banana peel might just slip everybody. So it would be good to clarify to everybody to say, this is the rule. If you do win 2/3 of the states, you need to also win Abuja. Or if you win 2/3 of the states, Abuja is irrelevant. Then I have another hypothesis, which is if you won 36 states, but you didn't win Abuja, in other words, if you got a quarter of the votes in 36 states, but you don't win Abuja, are you validly elected? This is the controversy. So rather than avoid the problem of 1979, I thought it necessary to take this, my friend's request, and say I put it to the the election managing body to say, can you clarify? So let's know what the rules are before the game starts. And as you say, it's 37 days away. So that was the reason I did this.
Fantastic. So let's do a bit of mathematics here, Lionel's sake.
I'm not good at mathematics, so let me warn you.
I'm not. I'm very terrible with mathematics, and if my secondary school mathematics teacher is watching now, he will be so disappointed.
Yeah.
But apologies. Well, it's just what it is. I'm not very fantastic with it, but it's basic, isn't it? 24 states is a 2/3 of 36, isn't it? So, for those who are wondering what this means, it is not so simple to be a president of Nigeria. So, yes, President Buhari won Atiku Abubakar with over 2 million votes the last time. That's a margin between the two men. Now, that alone could not have made him the president of Nigeria. He would have won in at least in 24 states, he would have won 25% in those 24 states. Now, Lenelsik, give us an understanding in view of what the law says. And I'm very certain that the Electoral Act is not in contravention or is not antithetical to what the Constitution of the Federal Republic says. So they are in alignment. But now, for those who are saying we might not have a conclusion on the first ballot, seeing the kind of candidates we've seen for a long time, at least from 1998 up until now, this is perhaps the first time we have more than 2 Aussies in the race. We are having at least 3 or 4 now, which means that there is going to be a level of technicalities that might be ready. But INEC says it is ready for that challenge of a second ballot. Now, beyond what you explained earlier, are there all the areas of this section, 33, 133, and 134, that we also need to, INEC need to be critically looking at?
Well, there are 2 sets of electoral processes. The first is if there are 2 candidates, then those 2 candidates, the person who scores the highest with a spread wins. And as you rightly observed, this is the toughest election that we're going into. Very uncertain. We have, for the first time, a very serious third force. So when you look at the permutations, you might then say, what if nobody takes the thing on the first shot? So INEC will now have to consider a second ballot. And I'm happy that the chairman of INEC has said that INEC is more than ready to do that. Now, the qualification for this second ballot is different. You just have to win on a simple majority. So if the second ballot takes place, and me, Olisa, I'm running against you, Shegun, and I have 10, you have 8, I win. So that's the difference. But the first one is more difficult. The first one is targeted at making sure the person who is president of Nigeria is enjoying a majority of the support of the diversity of Nigeria. If you looked at the list that INEC released concerning the voting numbers, I mean, I could actually look at taking Lagos and the Northwest and a couple of other states, and I can win. But the Constitution says no. We don't want a president who, even though he has a majority from 3 or 4 states, we won't declare him president because he doesn't represent Nigeria. So that's the difference between the first set of criteria and the second. So the first one speaks about spread. The second runoff speaks about simple majority or numbers. So that's the difference.
So, I mean, invariably, it is the section 134 subsection 1B that talks about, it says, and I quote here, that after the premise is on winning the simple majority. Now it now says he has not less than 1/4 of the votes cast at the election in each of at least 2/3 of all the states in the federation and the federal capital territory. Does this imply that instead of doing the mathematics of 36, we should actually be doing 37? Because it says end. That means that the state end the FCT.
That's what the purpose of my letter is. So I want to know, if I win, if I was running and I won a quarter of the votes in 36, not even 24, in all 36 states, but I failed to win a quarter of the votes in the FCT, would I be declared president? I've taken 36 states, or in fact, 36 states, I take 100% of the votes. So that's more than a quarter. But I do not make 1/4 in Abuja. Would I be declared president? My view is no. But because of the confusion and the way that the 19 to 13 came up, nobody ever gave a thought that Kano State could be divided, because a human being, a state is like a being. You can't split it. But the Supreme Court split Kano State. So I rather would like to promote the view that INEC must be prepared for all eventualities. I mean, the chairman of INEC's performance at Chatham House was perfect, but there might just be a banana peel. So the way I see it, INEC is more than prepared and ready to present to us free, fair, credible, verifiable, and transparent elections. But could Mr. Chairman of INEC just quietly look at this so that they mightn't be caught unawares? So it might look like a simple issue.
Yeah, it does look like a simple issue, but looking at it critically now, you've been looking into the technicalities of the law for so many years. So for you to have seen this means that there's something that we need to be careful about. Now,
I think so.
In this kind of situation, let us say, INEC also might have some kind of dilemma, which they might not be a puzzle, which readily they may not be able to resolve, because there is an obvious ambiguity in this section. Now, what does the law say about this kind of scenario? I thought that the Supreme Court is given the powers to review or to give us a direction when we find this kind of confusion. Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know whether they would want to do it, honestly. I don't. It's a difficult dilemma about how do you resolve all this. But my point is simply that let's clear all the ambiguity. So one way that it can be done is for INEC to approach the courts to say, well, no. Before that, INEC can say, well, actually, Mr. Agbakoba, you are not really right. We're used to this. The interpretation of Section 134 is very clear. So don't worry, we understand it. They could say that. That could be the reply that the chair of INEC would say. What you say, we take it, we understand it. But it's not really a problem, because we have had many elections and this is our standard. So our standard is as follows. So my letter would just be a smoke screen and they will dismiss it. But they could say, well, look, you have a point here. So what do we do? Do we wait for a problem to arise, or do we preempt the problem by going to court? Now, unfortunately, INEC cannot approach the Supreme Court directly. Now, would it be that the Attorney General of the Federation approaches the court? And in that case, he has the possibility of going to the Supreme Court. So there are all kinds of possibilities. But to be honest with you, I don't have the answer. That's the honest truth. My real concern was to present something I saw as a challenge that came from a friend, and I looked at it very closely. Okay, I'll just give an example. Section 134(1) says if there are only two candidates, then the person who has the majority will be declared winner. Then the other section, Section 134(2) says where there are more than two candidates, then the person who scores the highest. So I wonder, why the difference? Why is one saying majority, the other one is saying highest in the same electoral process? Is that not some sort of ambiguity? So there's a lot in the pot for INEC to really resolve. What I think that INEC can do my own opinion, is to issue a clarification, given their own experience, because I'm sure this is not something that will be new to them, to say, yes, we've seen this letter, but this is what we have done practically. So you need, for instance, to win a quarter of the votes in 2/3 plus Abuja. Or on the principle of incorporation, if you win 24 states but don't win Abuja, then you also can be declared president. So all INEC has to do is to declare what Section 134 really means.
It's a legal conundrum which
not
perhaps,
easy, not easy.
Not an easy one, trust me. But in all of this, I guess why this is coming up is because for the first time in a long time, perhaps since 1979, we've not come to a point where we are thinking, even at this point, a lot of political analysts said it is not clear who is going to win the election, despite all of the polls that have gone round and all of that, and what political parties and their candidates are saying. But just for a moment, I want you to also listen to what Mr. Wole Olanipekun said. He called on the National Assembly to consider changing the Section 65 of the electoral act. Let me allow you to listen to him, and I'll get your own view on what the learners said.
As a lawyer, which I can also say publicly, and which I've also, explained and whispered to people privately, is about Section 65 of the Electoral Act. To me, it's a very, very, very dangerous constitution. Section so novel in the sense that here you have a section which empowers a returning officer after returning to review his decision within a period of 7 days. The returning officer is not a court of law. The returning officer is not a tribunal. The returning officer is not vested with jurisdiction to exercise judicial or quasi-judicial decision or to assume jurisdiction over any matter that is judicial in nature. When election is conducted, a returning officer returns or makes a return. Immediately thereafter, depending on the number of days, any aggrieved party goes to court, not to go back to the returning officer that has made a return.
All right. That's Mr. Wole Olanipekun. Let us see, what is your view on yet another controversial part of it? This is an introduction that we just got from the amendment of the electoral law.
This is a field of administrative law that is very, very technical. And being a disciple of Professor Alexander, who was perhaps the greatest person in this field, there are two possible views to take. And I will support my learned brother when he says, I think the underlying point that Wole is making is the danger of handing over quasi-judicial powers to, I'm sorry to say, suspect INEC officials. Because a court of law has a defined process of dealing with issues. I'm not so sure that I can say so with the greatest possible respect to INEC officials. So in exercising quasi-judicial powers, because if you deliver a decision, once delivered under administrative law, it's final. It can only be reviewable by a court. But in advanced countries, administrative officers can exercise quasi-judicial powers. So it is possible to review a decision you've taken. To give that sort of power to INEC officials in the context of the difficulties and challenges we've had with INEC might pose a problem. So Wole's point is really, it's better to go to the judicial process that has a clearly defined way of dealing with reviews. So if you give the power to an INEC officer, having declared a result, to review it, he could do anything. That's the danger.
All right.
Could do anything.
Mr. Agbakoba, before you go, just in few seconds, Nigerians are presented with very tough choices in this election, especially at the presidential level. If you're speaking with millions of them tonight via this platform, what can you tell them tonight that might help them to make that decision for a greater Nigeria?
Yeah, you should look for a president who is giving you, first of all, hope, who promises that he will unite the country that has been quite disunited, who promises to pick up on the economy, which is a big issue, who also is very clear about the nature of the insecurity we suffer, who will deal with unemployment. These are what I call the big issues. A president who will give you hope, who will turn around the problems Nigeria faces. Unemployment, the youth are, on the streets, no jobs, no hope. That is the sort of person that I would hope, people would vote for.
Well, thank you so much for that insight tonight, Mr. Olisa Agbakoba, a former president of the Nigerian Bar Association and senior advocate of Nigeria. I guess this is a lot for not only lawyers and INEC to ponder on, but also for Nigerians also to think about. Is there a need for especially the National Assembly to think out with this part of the law so we don't find ourselves in a very troubled water ahead of the election? Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.